Ja, välkomna allesammans till den här presskonferensen där vi ska presentera Sveriges Riksbanks pris i ekonomisk vetenskap till Alfred Nobels minne för 2014. Welcome to this press conference where we shall soon present the Sveriges Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel for 2014. We will keep to our tradition and start in Swedish and then continue the presentation in English. And later on you are welcome to ask questions in either language. Ja, jag heter Staffan Normark, jag är ständig sekreterare här vid Kungliga Vetenskapsakademin. Och med mig här på podiet har jag professor Torsten Persson som är sekreterare i ekonomipriskommittén och professor Thomas Sjöström och professor Tore Ellingsen som är ordförande i ekonomipriskommittén vid Kungliga Vetenskapsakademin. Och de ska strax berätta om vad priset handlar. Ja, årets ekonomipris handlar om att tygla mäktiga företag. Kungliga Vetenskapsakademin har beslutat utdela Sveriges Riksbanks pris i ekonomisk vetenskap till Alfred Nobels minne år 2014 till professor Jean Tirole, University of Toulouse, Capitol, Frankrike. Och akademins motivering lyder: för hans analys av marknadsmakt och reglering. This year's prize in economic sciences is about taming powerful firms. The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has decided to award the Sveriges Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel 2014 to Professor Jean Tirole, Toulouse 1, Capitol University, France, for his analysis of market power and regulation. So Professor Tore Ellingsen will now give us a summary in English, please.
Thank you, Staffan. Is this on? It's on, or should I put it on? Large firms are important. Usually, size is a sign of economic health. Firms grow large if they perform better than their competitors. And as a general rule, we should encourage the flow of resources away from small and unproductive firms toward larger and more productive ones. Only if our firms are productive can our wages and our living standards be high. But not all large firms are productive. In some cases, firms are large and influential because the production technology only leaves room for one firm, a monopoly. We would not want to have several different railway tracks between two cities. We would not want to have several sets of water pipes into our houses. And it's enough with one local electrical transmission network. These monopolies don't dominate the market because they're productive. So the first question is, in the absence of competition, how may we encourage such producers to be productive? In markets that are not natural monopolies, firms usually become large because they are productive. This is the bright side of profit-seeking. But firms sometimes remain large because they are cunning. Large firms may abuse their dominant position to block competition from newcomers with better ideas. That is the dark side of profit-seeking. Thus, our second question is, how can we best prevent the abuse of market power? And finally, of course, there are many industries with several large firms. Our third question concerns that complicated case. How do we make sure that there is adequate competition between these oligopolists? With help of a branch of mathematics known as game theory, Jean Tirole has been thinking through these questions more deeply than any economist before him. And as a consequence, many different industry regulators, as well as competition authorities all over the world, have obtained a whole new set of tools. Let me give you just a tiny taste of how the game theoretic revolution has affected our thinking about regulation and competition policy. 30 years ago, monopoly regulation predominantly meant capping the monopolist's profit, a regime known as rate of return or cost of service regulation. Cost of service regulation makes sense from a distributional point of view. No monopolist is getting rich from producing the goods and services that we all depend on. But cost of service regulation does little or nothing to contain the producer's cost or to encourage quality improvement. Indeed, it was widespread dissatisfaction with high costs and low quality in the regulated sectors that triggered the wave of deregulation in the 1980s. The challenge of designing better regulations was taken up by Jean Tirole and his co-author, Jean-Jacques Lafont, who died prematurely a decade ago. Together, they published a series of influential articles about regulation theory. And according to them, the regulator's main problem is asymmetric information about opportunities. That is, the regulator knows much less about the scope for improvement than the monopolist does. So you see, she's blindfolded up here. However, the right response is not to apply cost of service regulation everywhere. Instead, cost of service regulation should only be applied to those producers who claim to have little scope for improvement. Producers who claim that they can do better should be offered a share of the added value that they generate. But such sophisticated regulation is tricky due to a second problem, the problem of limited commitment. An efficient producer may rightly be afraid of being exploited in the future. The regulator could say, "Oh, is that how efficient you are? Please hand over some more of your surplus." This is known as the ratchet effect, since requirements only ratchet up and never slide down. I think anyone who has made large purchases at the end of a budget year in order not to have the budget cut knows what I'm talking about. Such commitment problems on the regulator's side will discourage the firm from revealing its true productivity. And, as Lafont and Tirole showed, strong incentives no longer work so well. Their work, collected and extended in their 1993 book, develops in much more detail the nature of optimal regulation of monopolies under asymmetric information and limited commitment. It also sheds light on many other related problems, ranging from the optimal internal organization of firms to issues concerning privatization and public procurement. But in the interest of time, let me skip quickly to questions 2 and 3. In most industries, the government does not regulate individual producers. Instead, competition legislation restrains powerful firms from excluding their rivals and from exploiting their customers. But how should these competition rules be formulated? In the 1970s, many economists were still looking for general yet precise legislation that would apply equally to all industries. But as these economists were reasoning without the help of a rigorous formal framework, it was all too easy to overlook complications and jump to conclusions. For example, the conventional wisdom was that cooperation between firms in the same market segment, so-called horizontal agreements, are always bad, whereas cooperation between firms in successive segments, vertical agreements, are always all right. To the contrary, Jean Tirole and his co-authors showed that vertical agreements have significant potential to harm competition, whereas horizontal agreements sometimes have the potential to be useful. For example, in the case of patent pools. But, most importantly, all industries shouldn't be treated the same. The best regulation of the telecommunications industry is not the same as the best regulation of the banking industry. Now that may sound trivial, but the beauty of Tirole's work is that he has been able to describe deep and essential differences between various industries and to show just how regulatory policies ought to respond to those differences. As it happens, Jean Tirole is not only a star theorist, but also a great expert on many industries, including telecommunications and banking. So, it is with great enthusiasm that the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has decided to honor the monumental contribution of one of our greatest living economists. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Ellingsen. I think we have Professor Tirole with us on the phone from Toulouse in France. Bonjour, Professor Tirole. Congratulations. Right now I'm sitting here in the session hall at the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. We have a press conference here and many interested journalists from Swedish and international press. Are you ready, Professor Tirole, to take some questions from them?
Sure. Thanks so much first. I'm very honored and I'm willing to take questions also. I'm so moved that this may not be the best day to answer questions, but I'll try.
Okay. Here we have the first question.
Mr. Tirole, I suppose that people all over the world are Googling your name right now. So I have a question that, can you answer how is the best way to prevent companies like Google to misuse their position?
Well, we have been working on what's called two-sided market and try to understand how they will function and how to regulate them possibly. So two-sided markets are markets where you need to attract both sides of the market. So, for example, for Google, you need to attract what's called the eyeballs, the people who are going to go to the website, and the advertisers. And many such markets have these specificities, and any kind of platform, credit cards also, payment cards have this specificity. They must attract merchants and also cardholders and so on and so forth. What we have shown is actually that the antitrust economics of such markets are different from the standard markets. So, for example, often you have prices which are way below cost. Actually, if you think about Google, you as a customer, you get a very good deal. You actually get for free, and on top of that, you get all those services with email and search. By contrast, the advertisers are going to pay quite a lot. The same is true also for payment cards, where the merchant pays a lot and the cardholders get a lot. And that raises issues with competition policy, but not the standard issue about predation. Predation means that you are pricing below marginal cost, or even with monopoly pricing. So there are different issues. Now, it's clear that in such industries, by the way, you just tell me if I'm speaking too fast with emotion. It is clear that with such industries, the network externalities are very strong, so you have a tendency toward monopolization. Such monopolization is not dangerous as long as there is a possibility of entry. So having a temporary monopoly can be fine, but you need to have possible entry, what we call in industry organization, contestability, so that more dynamic firms can replace the incumbent firm. And the antitrust authorities have to be careful with that, But the message I want to send is that with those two-sided markets, the messages for competition policy are a bit different than the standard ones for one-sided markets, which we have been dealing with since the late 19th century.
Okay. Thank you very much. Do we have some more questions to Professor Tirole? There.
Hello, Professor. This is Yiming Fu from China's National Xinhua News Agency. First, congratulations to your achievement. And I would like you to give some brief comments on the banking industry. As for, given the current international situation in this economic crisis and recuperating, in the field of banking industry, what do you think the current authorities could learn or could draw on from your theory and apply them into practice and bring us back to normal? Thank you.
I think banking is a very hard thing to regulate, and we economists, academics, have to do more work on this. I mean, for example, we have been working for a long time. In particular, I've been working with my co-author, Bengt Holmström, and also with Emmanuel Fary on issues having to do with maturity mismatches, illiquidity and maturity mismatches. And now the authorities are putting in place some regulation of liquidity, which is a very good thing. But the details of which we haven't been very much working on. So that's one thing. We have to be careful, and that's a very important thing, to make sure that the regulated entities, and here I have in mind retail banking, insurance companies, pension funds, not be too much exposed to counterparty risk. And that's something from institutions which themselves are not regulated. So that's something that we had forgotten or ignored before the crisis. And that's why, for example, an institution like AIG, which was really an investment bank, had to be rescued, because otherwise there would have been turmoil in the markets because the counterparties would have been in trouble. So it's very important to think about the regulation. Regulation, and this is a theme that I've been developing with many other colleagues, of course, it's not only me, is a complex subject because it has to be light enough so that it doesn't kill entrepreneurship and gives rise to a lot of efficiency. But at the same time, you need to have a strong state which is going to enforce those regulations in an intelligent way. So it's a kind of difficult thing of having both light regulation, but at the same time some very integral regulation, which in particular is going to intervene early enough when a bank is doing wrong things. So it has to be very careful in its supervision.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have a final question there.
Professor Tirole, once again, congratulations on your prize. My name is Jens Sundström from TV4. I have a question regarding monopolies and oligopolies. Usually when they're studied, you're looking at nation states, but in an increasingly globalized world, is research and also policies from, for example, the European Union, keeping pace with increasingly globalized companies?
That's correct. And what you see more and more, and I think is a good thing, is more and more joint work between competition authorities. So even so, the laws are not quite the same in the US and Europe, for example. There's a lot of collaboration between the Department of Justice, for example, or the FTC in the US, and the European Commission Competition Directorate. And that's very important. Earlier there was mention of Google, but there are lots of other entities which are now multinational. So it's very hard to regulate without coordinating, in a sense. So that's true for antitrust authorities. That's true also for banking. I mean, of course, because many banks now are global. I think it's a very good thing, for example, that in Europe there's a banking union in Europe. It's a very good thing. Now, we don't know how it's going to work exactly, but the idea of having a banking union is actually a superb idea because it really will create a level playing field in Europe, and also the regulators won't be the home regulators, which sometimes can be captured as well, and that will take out some of the political influence out of the regulatory process. But you are completely right. We need global instances, and I think we are moving toward that. Global authorities, we are moving toward that in the case of antitrust. We are not yet there for climate change, which is a real political prime more than economic one. But you're completely right, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think that's were the questions, and thank you very much, and looking forward to see you in Stockholm in December. Congratulations again.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very grateful. I'm really very grateful. Thank you very much. Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Do we have any questions to the panel of experts here? If not, I'd like to end. Yeah, please, one question there. You will get a microphone.
Det vore ju synd att inte ta chansen att ställa en fråga när vi nu faktiskt har det här. Varför är monopol och oligopol en så viktig fråga att belysa ekonomin? Man tycker ändå att det här har ju varit ett problem som har följt en marknadsekonomi under väldigt lång tid. Kan ni fördjupa kanske lite mer om vad det är som faktiskt i den praktiska världen gör Tirols forskning så viktig?
Vem vill svara på det?
So the question was why monopolies and oligopolies, they've been around for such a long time, so why give a prize to research on that topic now? And I think one answer, so maybe not the best, but one answer to that is that our added grasp of this subject is so much better. So if you go back to the last time a prize was awarded in roughly this field in 1982 to George Stigler, that was before game theory had taken over the field. And if you look at the literature, and I'm sure George Stigler would have agreed if he were still alive, if you look at all the things that we've learned from 1982, actually the year after Jean Tirole defended his dissertation, and today, I think it's fair to say we've learned more about imperfect competition in that time span than we learned up until 1982.
Maybe if I can add to that. So what Tor is saying is that there was a major breakthrough in using game theory and contract theory to analyze these complicated issues, which is sort of on the researcher side. At the same time, there was a much greater demand for knowledge about how to regulate in the mid-1980s, where, as you remember, many nations started to deregulate previous natural monopolies, such as telecommunications, power companies, etc. The European Union started the single market. So issues about regulation and competition policy at the European level very much came to the forefront. And sort of the meeting of the sort of methodology to answer these questions and the demand from the public of what to do is really what spurred on this wave of research that Jean Tirole has led from the very beginning.
Fråga från Sveriges Television. En av de viktigaste politiska frågorna idag inom EU är att hur reglerar man finansmarknader för att undvika en ny finanskris? I can take maybe in English too. One of the most important political questions today in the EU is how to regulate the financial market to avoid a new financial crisis. So my question is, in what way is this a political prize this time?
I think not to a very large extent. I think that what Jean Tirole is doing is much more like engineering. So, of course, it's politicians who decide what bridges to be building and give priorities to trade-offs between, the size and the magnitude of the bridge and the safety and so on and so forth. So politicians will have to give economists their goals. But given those goals, regulation theory is well suited to work out what is the best regulation under those goals. I think, yes, I think to a relatively small degree is this a political prize.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I think we should close this press conference, and I want you all welcome to the 7th of December during the Nobel Week, when all the laureates in physics, chemistry, and economic sciences will meet the press here at the Academy. So, well then, and thank you for your attention.